Laura, we wanted to do a section, didn't we? Reflecting on the last 5 years, where we've got to, what stuck, what hasn't stuck, and kind of some of our very early predictions. You've pulled out some pictures here. This is just a reminder, isn't it?
This made me feel funny pulling out these pictures. I mean, we have worked on this every single week for 5 years. We've continued to interview 2,000 people every single week. We've continued with our qualitative panel. So we've lived this, and yet bringing some of these images back really are sort of one of those like weird sort of skin moments. But yeah, we started this just as we turned into lockdown.
Yeah, and so 5 years on, we're going to kind of look how the world has changed. And we've pulled this chart up a lot, haven't we? And I think it's really important, it's still relevant today, isn't it? That at any inflection point, there is danger for some brands that are on the wrong side of it, an opportunity for brands that jump onto the right side of it. And at the heart of that is our mantra about customer centricity, isn't it? That at times like the pandemic, it was very obvious what side of that line you needed to be. In normal times, it's less clear. And what we do is just help brands stay on the opportunity side of what can be things that are quite hidden in plain sight.
Yeah, definitely messy and muddy, and the sort of thing that makes sense 6 months on, but actually spotting it in the moment, I think, is hard.
Yes, absolutely. So that's our mantra for brands: continually audit, reassess, get on the right side of it. Well, if that's what brands are doing, it's exactly what consumers are doing.
Yeah, this is danger and opportunity completely playing
Personal
out,
level,
isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah, that sensation of just how fast the world is changing around us, the sort of pace of change, and it feels unbelievable. That quote that I always talk about, that I've heard so much from doing the qualitative element of this study for so long: are we living in a movie? It's like a film, it's like an episode of Black Mirror. That's that sense of danger, isn't it? And of course we seek to try and find the opportunity for ourselves. And so this data over on the right hand side, I always think staggering. There was a point in 2020 where we were really reassessing life, but it's just continued to grow
Peak.
all the way through that time.
Absolute
We are now
peak, yeah.
now at a peak.
And this is just that gut reaction of us, isn't it, to try and correct. And at this moment in time, we're seeing this storm of the world around us and the slump often, in the UK around our economy. And we're just trying to make sense of that, do the right thing. Let's reflect on some things that people have done in that reassessing. So one, I think, very nice thing is we've sort of taken stock and appreciate what comes for free in many ways.
Yeah, I think this is amazing, isn't it? A new appreciation of nature. Now, it was a sort of savior for so many people, I think, during lockdown, being able to get out every day for a walk, just kind of using kind of local areas. We had a big talk, didn't we, about the difference between actually if you had outside space, if you had a garden, if you had a balcony, that sort of thing, versus those who didn't during lockdown. But of course, as the years have kind of moved on, that has just kind of fueled us, kind of really grown. We've seen real beauty in it. It's somewhere where we've got a lot of pride and interest and curiosity from. I think it's something we continue to take a lot more photos of, that sort of just deep appreciation. And of course, as you say, it is just right in front of us. It happens for free.
Yeah. And, I think older people, previous generations just did this, didn't they? It was a less busy world. They saw more. And I really noticed this with my dad. Of course he was a farmer, so he would have a good appreciation for nature, but it's staggering the things that he knows that I just don't think my generation on average do know, but we've enjoyed learning that. So very magical, nice silver lining. I think the second thing is we've savoured me time. Now, there is a little bit of caveat around this because I think the me time is often interrupted with something in our ears or our social media feed. But I think on one level, we have liked that. We've liked being in our own bubble.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting because at the start of the pandemic, we were talking a lot about being disconnected, finding ourselves feeling kind of lonely, doing anything we could really to connect with other people. But as we started to come out of those lockdowns, one of our big observations at the time was people haven't just missed other people. Of course, there's an element of that. Of course, there is. What they'd really missed was time just being themselves, where they weren't in a house with loads of other people or having to be loads of different modes at once, from kind of work to, Zoom quiz to all of these sorts of things. We just wanted to kind of be us. And the moments people really savoured was like walking to the dentist,
Yeah.
being in the car on my own, those sorts of things. And so I think it has re-examined our experience just kind of with ourselves, and going out for a walk, just being with your own thoughts, as you say, that could obviously be,
With
might be on the phone or the podcast, or those sorts of things, but it is just a sort of a moment where we can sort of look at the world a little bit more, just be with ourselves.
Yeah, I think you're trying to ground yourself in this mad world, aren't you? I mean, and I think it's worth pointing out really that those numbers might not look as significant increase as we just showed on the previous charts, but we've got to say that the benchmark of 2020 is when we were all walking. That's all we could do.
It was the only sort of like
Yeah, yeah,
legal
yeah.
activity that we could partake in. So to think that we've walked even more, and you think all the memes and things that were going around at that point of like, can we really go on another walk? Well, yeah, we can. We've done it for 5 years.
Yeah. Okay, kind of a build on that is just the joy of being at home. So, I mean, in some ways we've anchored this back to 2021, not 2020, when we were kind of forced to be at home. But it has become a very safe, enjoyable place for us.
Yeah, we've sort of talked about it as both sanctuary and laboratory, haven't we? That it's been a place to retreat. We've spent time making our homes a nicer space, whether that's actually kind of physically investing in them by making spaces nicer, or just the pride in keeping them clean and tidy. They're that sort of space to retreat. We've got a very different relationship with things like telly and just sort of sofa time now. So there's a sense of kind of peace that comes from home. But I think also there's been this element of exploring and discovering, which we did get a taste for in lockdown. It was the place where we tried new recipes or joined this thing or did an exercise thing that we didn't think we were kind of cool enough to go for the actual class for, but definitely cool enough to do it in our living rooms via kind of YouTube. And so I think it's been a space of both kind of experimentation and kind of safe harbor.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was thinking as you were talking as well that the housing market's been quite slow over this period. So particularly the last 3 years, we've not actually moved house that much, but we've still liked the house that we've been in. So yeah, fascinating relationship. And I guess that does make sense, doesn't it? If this is all bonkers around us, this is the, our safe base, our foundation. And as you say, digital connection, digital entertainment has made that quite enjoyable as well. And building on that, I think we've learned to really love food over the last few years. Not only is it something that we can occupy ourselves at home with, but it's a relatively cheap way to explore new things.
Yeah, it can be a cost neutral way to explore new things, or just a little kind of incremental uplift. I think we've seen food become even more the center of a lot of gatherings, haven't we? Year after year after year, it moves up in terms of being the star of Christmas, of big kind of celebratory events, but it's also a big thing that just lifts that kind of every day. It has become something that we are obsessed with, that we photograph a lot, that is a route to kind of newness and discovery in so many ways. So yes, that's another sort of positive that has continued.
All of that, I hope we are being positive there. All of that is mostly nice in the moment, isn't it?
It's lovely things.
They're lovely things. They're the quiet life, and I think particularly at the early part of the pandemic, they were things that we thought, we'd lost some of that in the madness of our pre-pandemic life, and it was sort of reclaiming that. You highlight the problem here, that they're both nice but often instantly forgettable.
Yes, they don't have enough peaks, I think, those sorts of things. They are really enjoyable in the moment, going out for a walk, cooking something nice, but being out in nature. I don't think they've got the same sort of pace and enjoyment that we were kind of used to in our old life. And this brings us back to peak end theory, that our remembering self is disproportionately impacted by the highs. They can almost balance out some lows, and something that is peppered with really brilliant enjoyment and a few kind of problems gets remembered as brilliant, and something that sort of tips along on a more kind of even keel doesn't get remembered, gets remembered as okay. And I think that is the problem that we're facing into, that there have been some nice moments, the sort of slow life, the quiet life, appreciating what's around us. But that doesn't lead to big stories. It doesn't lead to a sense of having sort of spent time really, really well. It doesn't make our remembrance self that happy.
No, I also think it's poor on our anticipatory self as well, because we can't see peaks into the future. So we have less to look forward to, which I think is then detrimental to our overall level of optimism. And so the upshot is some nice things have happened. Important, I think, ground in nice things, learned some lessons about ourselves, but life still doesn't feel right. And we'd look at this, life feels normal, less than half the population still agree with that. And it's still lower than it was in sort of 2021 when the pandemic was just over.
Yes, and life was very strange at that point. I mean, that was a moment where there were almost, I remember sort of talking about, two tribes of people who really thought we were going too slowly out of lockdown, people who thought we were going kind of far too fast out of lockdown. Our life was still ruled by a lot of kind of procedures and rules and signs and things like that going out and about. There were lots of kind of inhibited experiences, and yeah, that kind of felt more normal than now. And I think that is that sense that we've come out of one storm into another. We've had to be very kind of control first. That's been the way to survive. Things about life have just been kind of curtailed, and so you end up with this slightly kind of blander feeling. We don't quite feel ourselves.
It's really interesting as well, isn't it? It's been a really slow kind of move out of the cost of living crisis, because of course those big peaks of normality were basically coming out of COVID. We got Omicron, which was that dip, and then life really did. And a lot of people said Omicron was the end of, like, the real end of the pandemic. It was a rush of normality. I spoke to a lot of people, incidentally, Laura, who did a lot of segmentation around that time. They thought post-COVID world, we need to take a look at who are our customers. Of course, there was quite a lot of economic optimism at the time. And then just look how atypical that is compared to now.
Yeah, I mean, it draws me back around sort of February or March time. I'd have to look back at the data to know. There were quite a few stories launching in the press around the Roaring 20s. And I remember us kind of calling that out. And that sort of felt very difficult. And so, yes, you're right. That was a period of kind of quite fast growing optimism, quite fast kind of momentum. I think, yeah, if you had done a segmentation around there, that's built on quite a lot of kind of artificial feel good.
And absolutely before the cost of living crisis really hit. So long way about impact absolutely hits. Now, we thought we'd reflect on our absolute first kind of big shout outs or big predictions around the pandemic and the lasting impact of it. This is from March 2021. So we're in the journey to that Freedom Day at this moment.
We were on a roadmap at that point, and we had a kind of life after lockdown predictions, and this was our assessment on where the UK was at,
and where it was going to stay.
And where it was kind of what would plague us, what would be the kind of big forces that would impact us over. And I think at that point we were thinking kind of the coming 18 months, and that was dispersion, inequality, and exhaustion. And I think it's incredible to think over kind of 4 years how many times we have returned to those exact titles.
So dispersion, first of all, was a sense that we would spend more time at home, less time seeing other people. It's still staggering, isn't it, that the peak getting together with other people over the last 5 years was Eat Out to Help Out. It's never been as high as that again. And basically ever since that budget of last November, we have seen fewer people. So we've become very dispersed, and it's almost our go-to strategy now, isn't it? Stay away from other people and you stay in control of your own spending and well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. Stretching out those kind of meet-up points just means that we aren't going to be sort of signing a blank check, saying yes to things and actually then kind of regretting them or trying to kind of add them up in the moment. It is a way of exercising control. And one of the things that we've talked about so much over this study is just how terrible humans are at moderation. And this is a way to sort of put a few kind of fences in and make ourselves feel slightly more secure.
So we've definitely been dispersed, and we've used that increasingly as a tactic. What that has meant is that we've just liked being amongst other people that I don't know. I feel safe, that I'm not going to have to spend on their terms, but I can soak up some of the energy of it. It is very significant, that data on the left-hand side, isn't it? Soaked up the atmosphere, 52-week rolling on our data, that's phenomenal sample sizes. It increased during the cost of living crisis, and it's just edged up ever since.
Yeah, this is an affordable kind of injection of energy. It's free, as you say, from that encouragement of spend. It's also free from other people's kind of problems. We can just take the best of those experiences. It is very kind of light interaction, kind of very positive, and very easy just to kind of skate through and feel kind of different, slightly kind of changed as a result, without kind of some of the baggage that comes with seeing other people.
Yeah, it's interesting that even that softened slightly, hasn't it, since that budget. So even this doesn't feel quite as kind of consequence free.
Well, yeah, we were looking at that the other week, weren't we, on the on the main report. Tom pulled out that going for a walk was looking kind of slightly more under pressure than we would expect.
Yeah.
And I was saying, well, it's not without any cost. You know, you drive somewhere nice that's got parking costs, or actually repair it with a coffee or a little ice cream or a treat or whatever. And so we are, I think, being very thoughtful.
And you know, coffee is expensive,
Yeah.
isn't it? So we've generally been drawn to the joy of strangers as a result of that dispersion. I mean, dispersion has absolutely happened in the workplace, and we are incredibly reluctant to go back to the office full time. We did a whole deep dive on it recently, but that is kind of the state of play, isn't it? It's only something we want more to be more dispersed at work.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when we look at what we're doing and what we would really want. There was actually only a very small period whereby those two things were nicely in line. We're now at a point where we're hankering it for it more than it's available to us, or we're being allowed
Is that
to.
loss aversion, do you think, that's being taken away from us?
I think
And
it
therefore
has
we
to
want
be.
it more.
And I think when we look at some of the wins of the pandemic that we were talking about at the start, you know, going out for a walk, appreciating nature, having nice food at home, a lot of that does, you can imagine a lot of that being much easier to kind of get a slice of if your working day can happen from home, a place that we want to spend more time at. So it sort of ticks a lot of boxes, doesn't it? But yes, absolutely. There's moments of dispersion that have worked for us. We've got more balance out of it. We feel better about it, and we've absolutely got loss aversion about getting rid of it.
The third strand was inequality. We predicted that it was kind of just a shake-up moment. The pandemic, it meant some people could see opportunity and take from other people. And right at the top end, it's been a phenomenal period for billionaires.
Yeah, phenomenal. I think when you look at these numbers, just what they've managed to add to their wealth in 5 years, it really is staggering. 14 trillion, just an incredible number.
Yeah. Well, it is. Yeah. I mean, Elon Musk could be the first trillionaire in one person. So it's staggering, isn't it? And the difference between a billion and a trillion is huge. So I think we've been right on inequality. And the truth is, even at a much more moderate level, then mass affluent people have been much less affected over the last 5 years than the much bigger group in their wake. And so if you look back at 2021, then life didn't feel normal for anybody. It came back, of course, for everyone a bit, but it's really a very significant margin between the mass affluent, top 20% of the population, and the rest. And not only does life feel more normal for that cohort, but we've really seen disproportionate spending power. We've pulled out fashion here. We could look at all manner of things, very similar pattern.
Yeah, absolutely. That moment whereby things were kind of more aligned, and then just how sort of separate that feels, and how that means for how we feel about ourselves, how different life feels, some of the peak moments that we were talking about in terms of our kind of reflections and anticipations of what might be changing next. It is a different game.
Yeah, and so the upshot of the inequality was, and the dispersion, the ag around the world, was that sense of exhaustion. That was our third kind of bubble, wasn't it? And interestingly, when we were making that, we were just under half the population who would agree with this. That has grown very significantly, and it's just stayed very sticky, hasn't it? It's just very hard to normalize, I think, what is happening, because it keeps changing.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. I think this is exactly that kind of sensation of that. We've had it in so many different ways, haven't we, over the last few years, but sort of that plodding along, that stickiness, that feeling of sort of treacle. I mean, it's even kind of moments, people saying, you know, when you just used to go and top up your grocery shop and not really think about it, and now you're kind of really thinking through things. I used to nip to the shop and spend less than £5. That's sort of gone. That sense of how we feel about the news and politics and so many different things, I think, that ladder up to just a sense of
Because really what us humans want to do is live life more or less on autopilot,
Yeah.
and we just can't do that.
Yeah.
And I think really the final build on it, the exhaustion, is a lack of trust in the organisations to kind of rectify the world around us. So we had great belief at the early part of the pandemic. That very quickly eroded, was at its absolute rock bottom around that sort of Johnson kind of period and Partygate and all of that. It's improved a little bit under Labour government, but it's still in very deep negative territory. This is exhausting. It's also a sense of got to be careful, what's next, and so this is what we're doing, Laura.
Yeah, we've learned to kind of have our eyes on what could come next, creating a buffer, shoring ourselves up, and so we now see savings really rise, very kind of focused on making sure that we are protected from the storm.
Yeah, so protection, a sense of control, absolute first base on kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We see it in health as well, played out in many different areas at the moment. But we've got an example here of just going to the gym, just really steadily increased. Of course, they were closed for quite a period, but they have grown as we want personal resilience to cope with this world that feels rocky around us.
Yeah, I looked this up actually. Gyms reopened on the 12th of April 2021. And so
Right,
yeah,
okay.
so
So they were open
everything
then.
on that
Yeah,
chart,
yeah,
yeah. And I think this is again that sense of protection, of shoring ourselves up. And this is about feeling kind of strong and ready within ourselves.
yeah. And then another interesting build is the desire for escape. Now, I've put two things on this chart. One is just holidays as a personal priority, and boy, they just increase and increase. So we want escape, don't we? We want to get away from this kind of madness to a little haven
Of
somewhere
peak.
of peak.
Yeah.
The truth is, it's not happening anymore. So there's a very big gap here between the dreams and reality.
Yeah. Really big gap. And I think this is one of those moments again whereby you get that kind of creep of exhaustion. You know, people have told us on the qualitative community, I think that sort of cheap getaway that used to be possible, I think that is like history now. I don't think that we're going to see that again. It feels kind of forever changed, I think. So yeah, this is a lot of appetite and not enough to kind of scratch that itch.
Yeah, so yeah, unresolved kind of desire for freedom there. A very quick reflection on the next 5 years, because we looked at this in Hello 2025. I guess one of our big reflections, Laura, is when we make predictions, we're often kind of in our minds thinking kind of what next. But of course, we're predicting quite a long way in advance. Those predictions that were in 2021 are still playing out now. The things we talked about in Hello 2025 are not just beginning of Hello 2025. We think these are deep reactions to these big tectonic plates that are changing. And so we're talking about several years, not just several months or weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is one of the big themes from our work on Hello 2025 and what we can see happening, that we are doing our best to focus in on ourselves. What can we control? Where can we win? And so we see ourselves less terrified about all of the things kind of happening around us and way more focused on prioritizing things that could really personally change the dial for us.
Yeah. What's going to be interesting here, Laura, is the number of things terrified that has kind of curled back up ever so slightly, hasn't it? So I think if that continues to grow, we will continue to prioritize ourselves, but it'll get quite ugly, quite selfish, because we really can't believe that we can win and other people can win.
Yeah, that was sort of unspoken, I think,
Yeah.
thus far, but there's going to come a point whereby
Where
that
it's going to be a little bit more of it, isn't it? So just a reminder, these were the 9 reactions. We absolutely think they're going to play out. One of those did hint at that kind of selfish, we'll try smart. It's like, no, I've got to put myself first. I think that could be a very hot territory if we really do start to believe that the world is very worrying.
Yeah, absolutely.